Picture this. You walk into a room, and immediately someone starts talking a little too loud, laughing, a little too hard, telling you all the things they've accomplished, unsolicited. Another person keeps cutting you off, won't let you get a word in. And then there's that one individual who constantly needs your reassurance. Do you think I did okay? Was that good enough? What do you think of me? At first glance, they look confident, bold, maybe even powerful. But if you pay attention, if you know what to look for, you'll realize what's really going on. What you're witnessing isn't strength. It isn't confidence. It's insecurity, loud, messy, and desperate to be covered up. Here's the truth. Insecure people are everywhere. They're in your workplace, they're in your friendships, they're in your relationships. And sometimes, if you're not careful, they can pull you into their chaos and drain the life out of you. But here's the catch. Insecure people don't usually introduce themselves as insecure. They don't walk around saying, hey, just so you know, I don't feel good about myself. No, they wear masks. They build facades. They project images they desperately want you to believe. And if you can't see past it, you'll mistake weakness for confidence, manipulation for leadership, and desperation for charm. The real question is, can you spot it? Can you look past the noise, past the show, and recognize when insecurity is standing right in front of you? Because when you can, you take back your power. You stop falling for illusion. And most importantly, you stop letting someone else's weakness dictate how strong you feel. So today we're going to strip down the disguises. We're going to dig deep. I'm going to show you exactly how to identify an insecure person clearly, quickly, and without second-guessing yourself. And once you can see it, you'll never unsee it. You can dress it up. You can put the sharpest suit on it, throw a flashy car behind it, add in the loudest laugh in the room, and insecurity will still find a way to spill through the cracks. You see, insecurity is like water. It always leaks. It doesn't matter how tightly someone tries to seal it. It seeps out in their words, their tone, their body language, even in the way they move through life. And once you learn to watch for it, once you train yourself to see it, you'll realize how many people you've mistaken for being strong, when really they're terrified on the inside. Think about the person who can't stop talking. You know, the one, every time you're in a conversation, they dominate it. They speak faster, louder, more animated than everyone else. Now, at first, you might think, wow, they're confident. But ask yourself, if you're secure, if you're grounded, why do you need to fill every silence with noise? Why do you feel the need to overshare, to rush to prove yourself, to push your voice above all others? That's not strength. That's insecurity leaking out. Silence terrifies insecure people because silence gives others space to think. And when others think, the spotlight shifts. Insecurity hates losing the spotlight. And then there's the flip side, the quiet kind. The person who avoids eye contact, keeps their shoulders hunched, laughs nervously at things that aren't funny, constantly fidgets with their clothes or phone. It's as if their whole body is trying to shrink, to disappear. People assume they're just shy, but often what you're actually seeing is insecurity leaking out in another form. Not all insecurity is loud. Sometimes it's the exact opposite. It's the inability to hold yourself in your own skin, the discomfort of simply being seen. Now let's take a closer look at language, because words are one of the biggest giveaways. Insecure people reveal themselves in the way they speak. Listen carefully, and you'll hear the constant I statements. I did this, I know them, I went there, I'm the one who. Every sentence is about proving value, proving worth, proving existence. Secure people don't need to tell you how great they are. They just are. But insecurity, it's like a salesperson that never stops selling, because deep down they don't believe the product is good enough. And pay attention to tone. Someone says, oh, I was just joking, but the bite in their words was real. They say, I don't care, but you can hear the crack in their voice that tells you they care more than anything. They say, I'm fine, but their body is stiff, their smile forced. Insecurity is often hidden behind words that don't match actions, and the truth leaks out in the mismatch. Confident people align what they say and how they act flows together. Insecure people don't, because they're always performing, and performances eventually slip. Here's another big one. Approval seeking. The insecure person will constantly scan your face for validation. Did you smile at their joke? Did you nod at their story? Did you compliment them enough? They'll ask, what do you think? Was that okay? Do you like this over and over again? They can't hold their own ground, so they're always checking to see if yours will hold them up. It's exhausting to be around because they're pulling energy out of you to feed the emptiness in themselves. That hunger for approval, it leaks out no matter how hard they try to cover it. Now let's talk about body language. Watch how someone enters a room. A secure person walks in, steady, present, comfortable in their skin. They don't need to make an announcement. They just are. But an insecure person, they either puff up, chest out, shoulders back a little too exaggerated, making sure you notice them, or they shrink like they hope you don't. Both are giveaways. One screams, please see me as powerful, and the other whispers, please don't notice how small I feel. Both are insecurity leaking into posture. You've also seen it in competitiveness. Someone can't just let you have your win. You tell them about your new job, and suddenly they're telling you about their promotion. You mention a trip, they've been somewhere better, you achieve something, and they quickly one-up you or downplay it. Why? Because insecure people can't stand to let others shine. They see your success as a reflection of their failure. They're constantly comparing, constantly measuring, constantly needing to level the scale. That's insecurity leaking into relationships, poisoning connection with competition. And here's what's important to understand. Insecurity always shows itself because it's built on fear. Fear of not being enough, not being loved, not being valued, not being respected. Fear cannot sit still. It fidgets, it lashes out, it overcompensates, it hides, it makes noise. And if you're paying attention, you'll see it every single time. But here's where people get it wrong. They confuse arrogance with confidence. They confuse volume with certainty. They confuse attention-seeking with strength. Don't make that mistake. When someone's secure, they don't need to convince you of who they are. Their presence is calm, steady, natural. They're not in a rush to prove anything. They're not grasping at your validation. They're not overcompensating with stories, possessions, or drama. They simply are, and it speaks louder than any performance. The beauty of learning to spot insecurity is that once you do, you stop falling for the act. You stop being impressed by the wrong things. You stop getting manipulated by the noise. You can look someone in the eye, see past the show, and know exactly what you're dealing with. And that's power, because the moment you can see insecurity clearly, it loses its hold on you. The truth is this. People will always try to hide their insecurities. They'll dress them up, mask them, disguise them in 1,000 different ways, but they'll never be able to hide them completely. They leak out, always. And when you train your eye to see it, you won't just recognize it in others. You'll recognize it in yourself. And that's when real strength begins. Because the most powerful thing you can ever do is stop leaking, stop hiding, and start owning exactly who you are. When someone feels small inside, they rarely admit it outright. Instead, they build a mask. And one of the most common masks people wear is overcompensation. Overcompensation is like putting on a costume that's 3 sizes too big. It looks impressive from a distance, but when you get close, you can see it doesn't fit. It's exaggerated, it's forced, it's a cover for the truth they're desperate to hide. They don't feel good enough. Think about the person who can't stop bragging. Every conversation somehow circles back to their achievements, their possessions, their connections. They'll slip it in even when it doesn't belong. Oh, when I was meeting with so-and-so executive, or that reminds me of the time I was in Europe. They're not telling you these things to connect with you. They're telling you because they're trying to inflate themselves, hoping that if they talk about their accomplishments enough, you'll overlook the emptiness they feel inside. But here's the thing. Truly confident people don't need to announce their greatness. They let their work, their presence, and their character speak for them. The louder someone shouts about who they are, the less they believe it themselves. Overcompensation shows up in how people treat others too. Have you ever met someone who constantly belittles those around them? They cut people off, dismiss ideas, talk down to coworkers or friends. On the surface, it looks like arrogance, but peel it back, and you'll see someone trying to feel bigger by making others smaller. That's the essence of overcompensation. It's a defensive strategy, a way of saying, if I can keep you beneath me, maybe I won't feel so low. But strength doesn't require putting anyone else down. Strength stands on its own. You can also spot overcompensation in the material world. The person who has to flash the luxury car, the designer labels, the expensive watch, they might not actually be celebrating success. Often they're trying to purchase confidence, trying to buy respect, trying to mask the insecurity of not feeling like they belong. There's nothing wrong with enjoying nice things, but when someone needs to display them constantly, it becomes less about enjoyment and more about validation. It's not the car they're showing off, it's the hope that you'll believe they're powerful, successful, or worthy because of it. Another clear giveaway is storytelling. You'll notice people who exaggerate their experiences, making events bigger, flashier, more dramatic than they actually were. A simple story about helping someone becomes a tale of heroic sacrifice. A minor challenge at work becomes a battle they single-handedly conquered. They stretch the truth because the truth feels too small to them. That's overcompensation leaking out. It's not about reality. It's about the image they want you to buy. Overcompensation doesn't just live in words or possessions. It shows up in behavior too. Pay attention to the person who always has to win. Whether it's a casual game, a debate, or even something as simple as walking through a door, they must come out on top. Losing, even in the smallest way, threatens their fragile sense of self. So they fight harder than necessary, argue longer than needed, and compete where competition doesn't even exist. It's exhausting to be around because everything becomes a battlefield, and the reason is simple: they can't stand to feel inferior, not even for a moment. Now let's talk about aggression. Overcompensation often hides in anger. A truly secure person doesn't need to explode when challenged. They can listen, process, respond. But an insecure person who overcompensates will lash out, raise their voice, or try to intimidate. Why? Because deep down they're terrified of being exposed. Anger becomes their armor. The louder and scarier they appear, the less likely anyone is to see what's underneath. But that's the trick: when someone reacts with outsized aggression to something small, they're not showing strength. They're showing how fragile they really are. There's also a type of overcompensation that looks like extreme independence. You'll meet people who insist they don't need anyone, ever. They brag about how they do everything alone, how they don't trust or rely on others. At first it might look like toughness, but often it's insecurity in disguise. They overcompensate by rejecting connection because connection feels risky. If you let people in, they might see your cracks. So instead, they build walls and pretend those walls are strength. But strength isn't the absence of vulnerability. Strength is being secure enough to allow it. The tricky part is that overcompensation can be seductive. It can make someone look charismatic, impressive, magnetic. The big stories, the flashy lifestyle, the commanding presence. It draws people in. But if you scratch just beneath the surface, you'll notice the cracks. You'll see the desperation in the way they need to be seen, need to be admired, need to win. Real confidence doesn't need constant reinforcement. It's steady, it's quiet when it wants to be. It doesn't seek a spotlight, it creates one naturally. Here's the key: when someone is truly comfortable in who they are, they don't need to add layers to prove it. They don't need to push others down, inflate stories, or showcase trophies. They can celebrate their wins without bragging. They can own nice things without flashing them. They can stand in silence without panicking that someone might not notice them. That's the difference between authenticity and overcompensation. And let me tell you this: when you learn to spot overcompensation, you'll also protect yourself from manipulation. Because insecure people who overcompensate often use their act to control others. They'll try to impress you, overwhelm you, intimidate you, or distract you. If you don't see it for what it is, you'll play into their game. But once you recognize it, once you say that's not confidence, that's overcompensation, you can step back, detach, and refuse to feed their mask. Overcompensation is a red flag because it tells you someone is hiding something deeper. It tells you they don't feel enough. It tells you they're building a version of themselves for you to admire, while secretly hoping you never see the real version. And here's the irony. The more they overcompensate, the more obvious it becomes. Because when someone truly knows their worth, they don't have to sell it. They just live it. So, the next time someone comes in, bragging too loud, showing off too much, pushing too hard, don't be fooled. Don't confuse the costume for the person. Look closer. See through the act. Overcompensation doesn't reveal confidence. It reveals exactly the opposite. There's a certain type of person you've met, the one who has to run the show. They decide where everyone sits, they dictate the conversation, they cut people off, they correct every little mistake, and they cannot stand it when things don't go their way. At first they look powerful, they look commanding. They look like they've got it all under control. But if you strip away the act, what you'll really find is not power. It's weakness. It's insecurity. Because here's the truth. Control freaks are often the weakest people in the room. Why do they act this way? Because deep down, they're afraid. Afraid of being exposed. Afraid of not being good enough. Afraid of losing their grip on the world around them. And instead of building real confidence, instead of learning to adapt, they cling to control like a lifeline. It's their shield. It's their armor. But it's also their cage, because the more they try to control others, the more they reveal how little control they actually have inside themselves. You'll notice it in conversations first. The control freak will constantly interrupt. They don't just want to be heard. They need to be heard because silence from others feels like rejection to them. If you're talking, they're already preparing their response. They can't listen deeply because listening would mean giving up control for even a few seconds. Watch how they speak. They talk over people. They repeat themselves. They force their opinions through. They think they're showing strength, but what they're really showing is fear. Fear that if they're not dominating the conversation, they'll fade into the background. Now look at how they handle tasks and decisions. Control freaks are the micromanagers. They hover, they nitpick, they redo other people's work, not because it's wrong, but because they can't stand the idea of letting go. If you've ever had a boss who rechecks every email you send, or a partner who insists on telling you the right way to load the dishwasher, you've seen it firsthand. It's not about the email, it's not about the dishwasher, it's about their inability to trust anyone else. Because if they let someone else take the lead, even in a small way, their insecurity whispers, what if you're not needed? What if you're not in charge? What if you don't matter? And that's the thought they can't handle. Control freaks also struggle deeply with uncertainty. Life throws curveballs. It always has. It always will. Secure people adapt. They adjust. They ride the waves. But the insecure person who thrives on control, they panic. They snap. They lash out. They scramble to grab onto anything they can manage because chaos terrifies them. And here's the paradox. The more they try to control, the less control they actually have. Life doesn't bend to their will, and when it doesn't, their weakness gets exposed. You'll also see this in relationships. A control freak partner will dictate what you wear, who you talk to, how you spend your time. They mask it as caring or just wanting the best for you. But at its core, it's insecurity. They don't trust that they're enough, so they try to trap you in rules and restrictions. They think if they can control the environment, they can keep you from leaving or seeing them for who they really are. But the harder they squeeze, the more people pull away. Control never builds closeness. It builds resentment. In friendships, it shows up as the person who always has to plan everything, always has to choose where you go, what you do, when you do it. They'll disguise it as, oh, I'm just organized, but pay attention. Do they actually care about the experience, or do they just need the power of being the one who decides? Insecure people often can't stand to let others take the wheel because it reminds them of how little control they feel over themselves. And then there's anger, a control freak's favorite tool. The moment something slips through their fingers, the moment someone pushes back, they explode. They yell, they intimidate, they try to force compliance through fear. But here's the thing, people who are genuinely strong don't need to scare others into obedience. They earn respect naturally. Anger as a control tactic is just another mask, another way of saying, I don't know how to lead, so I'll dominate instead. It's not real authority, it's desperation disguised as dominance. Let's be clear, real strength is not about controlling everything around you. Real strength is about controlling yourself, your thoughts, your emotions, your reactions. That's the kind of control that cannot be shaken, no matter what's happening on the outside. But insecure people flip it. They neglect their inner world and pour all their energy into trying to manipulate the outer world. It's backwards, and it's why they'll never feel satisfied. Because no matter how tightly you try to grip the outside, you'll never master it. Life doesn't play by your rules. The sad part is, most control freaks don't even realize what they're showing. They think their micromanaging proves their competence. They think their dominance proves their power. They think their constant correction proves their intelligence. But what everyone else sees is obvious. A person terrified of letting go, terrified of being exposed, terrified of not being good enough unless they're running the show. The irony is, the people who try the hardest to control others usually have the least control over themselves. They're reactive, they're defensive, they're fragile. One disagreement can throw them into rage. One challenge can send them into panic, and that's what makes them weak, not their desire for control, but their inability to control the one thing that actually matters themselves. So when you come across a control freak, don't be fooled. Don't mistake their aggression for strength. Don't mistake their dominance for leadership. Don't mistake their grip for power. Look deeper. What you're really seeing is insecurity on display. And once you recognize it, you can decide, do you engage or do you step back? Because the truth is, you'll never win trying to wrestle control from someone who's terrified of losing it. The best move is to protect your own energy, strengthen your own center, and refuse to get pulled into their chaos. Here's the lesson. The strongest people don't need to control others. They don't need to micromanage every detail. They don't need to dominate conversations. They don't need to dictate relationships. They lead themselves first, and because they're secure inside, they create space for others to thrive. They don't fear uncertainty. They don't panic when life shifts. They don't collapse if they're not the one in charge. That's what true power looks like. And so when you see a control freak in action, remember this: the tighter the grip, the weaker the hand, the louder the demand, the softer the foundation. What looks like dominance is often just fear in disguise. And once you see that clearly, you'll never confuse control with strength again. One of the easiest ways to spot insecurity is to watch how someone reacts when they feel challenged. You don't need a degree in psychology to see it. You just need to pay attention. When someone is secure in who they are, they can take feedback. They can listen without breaking. They can hear another perspective without feeling threatened. But when someone is insecure, even the smallest comment can set them off. They get defensive. They overreact. Their ego is so fragile that the slightest tap feels like a direct attack. And when you see this kind of behavior, you're not seeing strength, you're seeing insecurity laid bare. Think about the person who cannot accept criticism. You offer them a suggestion at work, something small like, hey, maybe we could try this approach instead. Instead of hearing you out, they immediately shut down, roll their eyes, or snap back with, well, if you think you can do it better, then you do it. That reaction isn't about your comment, it's about them. They hear correction as rejection. They take feedback as a threat to their worth, because deep down they don't believe they're enough. So any hint that they might be wrong feels like confirmation of their worst fear. You'll also notice defensiveness in how people explain themselves. An insecure person rarely takes responsibility. Instead, they'll justify, rationalize, or deflect. They'll pile on excuses before you even finish your sentence. Say you point out a mistake, and suddenly you're listening to a long list of reasons why it wasn't their fault. The timing was off, someone else didn't pull their weight, the instructions weren't clear. They can't just own it and say, "You're right, I'll fix it." That would require security. That would require self-trust. Insecurity won't allow that, so it forces them to protect their ego at all costs, even when it makes them look worse. Then there's the victim mindset. Defensiveness often morphs into playing the victim. You try to address an issue and they immediately turn the tables. "Why are you always picking on me? You don't understand what I'm going through. Everyone's against me." Instead of facing the problem, they shift the spotlight onto their suffering. Why? Because if they position themselves as the victim, they don't have to take responsibility. They don't have to admit they were wrong. It's a survival mechanism for their fragile ego, and it shows you just how insecure they really are. Defensiveness also shows up in anger. The fragile ego doesn't just hide behind excuses, it lashes out. A small critique can trigger a huge reaction, raised voices, accusations, slamming doors. They'll tell you you're wrong, you're unfair, you're the problem. But remember this, anger is almost always a cover. It's rarely about power. More often, it's about pain. It's about someone's inability to sit with the discomfort of not being perfect, of not being admired, of not being beyond reproach. So they fight back harder than necessary because to them, admitting a flaw feels like admitting defeat. You'll see this defensiveness in conversations where someone feels out of their depth. Instead of listening and learning, they argue relentlessly, desperate to prove they know what they're talking about. They'll nitpick words, derail the conversation, or throw in irrelevant points just to avoid the possibility of looking ignorant. A secure person has no problem saying, "I don't know, teach me." But the fragile ego can't handle that. It's terrified of looking small, so it puts on a show of certainty, even when everyone can see through it. Notice how defensive people handle praise too. You'd think a compliment would be easy to accept, but not for the insecure. They either downplay it, "Oh, it was nothing, I didn't really do that well," or they inflate it, turning one kind word into a monologue about how great they are. Both responses reveal the same thing: a fragile ego that doesn't know how to hold balance. Either they can't believe the compliment because deep down they don't feel worthy, or they cling to it too tightly because they need it to prop themselves up. Relationships become difficult when defensiveness takes over. You can't resolve conflict with someone who deflects, blames, or explodes at every conversation. Simple disagreements spiral into full-blown arguments, not because of the issue itself, but because their ego can't tolerate being questioned. Instead of working with you to find a solution, they work against you to protect their pride. And that's how insecurity destroys connection, because you can't build intimacy with someone who's constantly shielding their fragile self-image. Now, let's talk about growth. Growth requires the ability to admit you don't know everything, to make mistakes, to be corrected. Without that, you stay stuck. That's why insecure, defensive people rarely progress. They're too busy protecting their ego to learn, too busy defending themselves to adapt. Contrast that with someone secure. They welcome feedback. They don't see it as an insult, they see it as information. They're not afraid of being wrong, because being wrong doesn't threaten their worth. It just teaches them something new. That's why secure people grow, and insecure people stay the same. The irony of defensiveness is that it pushes people away. The more someone tries to protect their fragile ego, the more they isolate themselves. Colleagues stop giving them feedback because it's not worth the backlash. Friends stop being honest because they don't want to deal with the drama. Partners stop communicating because every conversation turns into a battle. And so the insecure person ends up trapped, surrounded by silence, with no one willing to challenge them. In their attempt to protect themselves, they create exactly what they fear: rejection. Here's the truth. A strong person doesn't need to be defensive. They don't need to fight every correction. They don't need to explain away every flaw. They don't need to explode when challenged. They know who they are, and that knowledge creates stability. They can take a hit without breaking. They can take criticism without crumbling. They can admit mistakes without feeling worthless. That's what security looks like. So when you come across someone who's constantly defensive, don't mistake it for strength. Don't confuse their intensity with passion or their anger with conviction. What you're really seeing is fragility. What you're really seeing is insecurity wrapped in armor that cracks the moment it's touched. And once you recognize it, you'll know exactly what you're dealing with. The next time someone reacts defensively, pause. Don't get sucked into their chaos. Don't waste energy trying to convince them of something they're not ready to hear. Remember, their defensiveness isn't about you. It's about them. And the strongest thing you can do is refuse to mirror their fragility. Stand steady. Stay grounded. Because the more solid you are, the more their weakness stands out. The most important part of all of this is not just being able to recognize insecurity in others, but knowing what to do once you've spotted it. Because here's the truth, insecure people can be dangerous to your peace, to your growth, to your mindset. If you're not careful, you'll absorb their energy, you'll take on their patterns, you'll start to feel their insecurity like it's your own. And that's why the final and most critical lesson is this. Spot it, but don't catch it. Insecure people are magnetic. They pull you into their drama. They pull you into their chaos. They pull you into their need for validation, their need to dominate, their need to control. And if you're not grounded, you'll find yourself responding to them instead of living on your own terms. They brag and suddenly you feel the urge to prove yourself. They criticize and suddenly you feel the need to defend. They compete and suddenly you're playing a game you never wanted to play. That's what it means to catch insecurity. It spreads. It's contagious. And the only way to protect yourself is to see it for what it is and refuse to let it stick to you. Think about a time someone insulted you out of nowhere. Maybe it was a coworker who made a sarcastic remark about your work. Maybe it was a friend who dismissed your achievement. Maybe it was a partner who snapped at you over something small. In that moment, it's easy to take it personally. It's easy to get defensive, to argue back, to feel hurt. But what if you could see beyond the words? What if you could recognize that their attack wasn't about you at all? It was about them, their insecurity leaked out, and you just happened to be standing in front of them when it did. If you can spot that truth, you take away its power. Instead of catching their insecurity, you let it pass by. One of the best skills you can build in life is emotional distance, the ability to observe without absorbing. When you spot insecurity, don't rush to fix it. Don't waste your time proving yourself to someone who will never be satisfied. Don't get pulled into their arguments, their games, their drama. Step back and say to yourself, this isn't mine. This belongs to them. That mindset is freedom because it keeps you from carrying a weight that was never yours in the first place. It's also about boundaries. Insecure people will test your limits. They'll push, they'll prod, they'll pull you into their cycles. And if you don't set clear boundaries, they'll drain you. They'll take your energy, your time, your peace. Spotting insecurity allows you to decide where to draw the line. Sometimes that means limiting how much time you spend with certain people. Sometimes it means refusing to engage in certain conversations. Sometimes it means walking away completely. Boundaries are how you protect yourself from catching what isn't yours. Now here's the trap most people fall into. They try to save the insecure person. They think, if I just reassure them enough, if I just prove myself, if I just give them what they need, maybe they'll change. But you can't fix insecurity for someone else. You can't fill a hole. They refuse to fill themselves. You'll exhaust yourself trying to be their constant source of validation, and it will never be enough. Because insecurity doesn't get solved from the outside, it only gets solved from within. So the best thing you can do is recognize it, adjust your expectations, and protect your own energy. Another way insecurity spreads is through comparison. Insecure people live in constant comparison, and if you're not careful, they'll drag you into it. They'll make you feel like you're always competing. Who has the better job, the better car, the better relationship, the better life? But here's the truth. Comparison is the thief of joy. The moment you start playing that game, you've already lost. Because there will always be someone with more. If you spot an insecure person trying to pull you into that trap, step back. Remind yourself you're not in competition with anyone else. Your lane is your lane. Their insecurity doesn't have to become yours. The power of spotting insecurity is that it gives you clarity. When someone is defensive, you don't waste energy arguing. When someone is controlling, you don't let them manipulate you. When someone is overcompensating, you don't get impressed or intimidated. You see the behavior for what it is, and you choose your response. That's strength. That's freedom. That's how you stop insecurity from leaking into your own life. And let me say this, spotting insecurity in others can also be a mirror. Sometimes the very things that annoy us most in other people are the things we haven't faced in ourselves. The bragging, the defensiveness, the control. Maybe you've caught yourself doing those things too. That's not a reason for shame. That's an opportunity. Because when you spot insecurity in yourself, you can choose not to feed it. You can stop the cycle. You can decide to build real security instead of covering up with masks. At the end of the day, you can't control who's insecure around you. You can't stop people from overcompensating, from being defensive, from trying to dominate. But you can control how you respond. You can control whether you absorb it or let it bounce off. You can control whether you get pulled into their storm or stand calm in your own center. That's the difference between spotting insecurity and catching it. So here's a challenge. The next time you're around someone who triggers you, pause. Ask yourself, is this about me or is this about their insecurity? If it's about them, let it go. Protect your peace. Don't waste your energy proving yourself to someone who's fighting a battle inside their own head. Spot it, but don't catch it. Because the strongest person in the room isn't the loudest, the angriest, or the most controlling. The strongest person is the one who can see clearly, stay calm, and keep their power, no matter what storm is swirling around them. That's your job. Not to fix others. Not to fight them. Not to play their games. Your job is to spot insecurity, recognize it for what it is, and refuse to let it touch your sense of self. That's real strength. That's unshakable confidence. And once you master that, you stop reacting to other people's weaknesses and start living fully in your own strength. At the end of the day, it all comes down to this. People will always show you who they really are. Insecurity may hide behind arrogance. It may hide behind control. It may hide behind defensiveness, but it always leaks out. Your power isn't in fixing it. Your power isn't in feeding it. Your power is in recognizing it and standing firm in who you are. Because strength is not about being the loudest voice in the room. It's not about proving yourself, dominating others, or pretending you've got it all together. Real strength is quiet. It's steady. It's unshakable. Real strength is the ability to walk into any room, face any person, and know that no matter what insecurity they project onto you, it does not change your worth. So let them brag, let them posture, let them try to control, to compete, to tear down. That's their battle, not yours. Your job is to see clearly, to protect your peace, and to never ever hand your power over to someone else's weakness. Remember this, insecurity is contagious, but so is confidence. And when you choose not to catch other people's insecurity, when you choose to stay grounded in your own value, you give others permission to do the same. You become the example, the anchor, the person who doesn't just survive in a world full of fragile egos. You rise above it. So spot it. Don't catch it. And never forget, your greatest weapon is not control, not defensiveness, not overcompensation. Your greatest weapon is the unshakable knowledge that you are enough exactly as you are. Stand in that truth, and nothing, no mask, no facade, no insecurity can touch you.